just on this DOE report, which I've read, it's a very good report in my view, so I encourage everyone to read it and also to read the IPCC stuff. You can make your own views or judgments. Just on the report, you mentioned this is a report written by climate scientists, and as you say, they don't deny there's a link between greenhouse gas emissions and a warming effect. But the fact they've got a different view, doesn't that show that there is not a consensus on the detail of climate change and how it impacts our environment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take that. You know, I think that question, you were asking about the tropes. That question sort of trying to co-opt the language of science shows you one of the techniques that people use to push misinformation, because the DOE report is misinformation. Make no mistakes about that. So the idea in science is that there are arguments about the science until there aren't. And once the scientific community decides that an idea no longer is interesting, then it's done. You don't need to debate that anymore. And if you try to continue to debate it, like, is the Earth warming? That's not an interesting question. There are interesting questions like how much is it warming or which technique gives us the most accurate estimates. But the idea, is it warming, is not interesting. So if you take the DOE report, it's full of questions that really have already been answered. So if you look in there, they talk about, is climate change making heat waves more severe? That's not an interesting question. That's misinformation. If you ask the question, I'm trying to think of it, is sea level rise accelerating? Again, that's not an interesting question, okay? If you ask the question, what about, is carbon dioxide good for plants? These questions have been answered in the literature, and the DOE report makes its case by ignoring 99% of the literature that's out there, and they cherry pick and they misquote and they misinform. So I'm very sad to hear that you think it's a good report, because it is literally misinformation.
Well, that's the view you've got. I've got a different view. That's the great thing about humanity. We've all got different views. I mean, the issue I've got is when I read the IPCC summary report for policymakers, it's overly dramatic and often not consistent with the technical reports. And so I've got, no, the technical reports of the IPCC reports are great. I read a lot of them. And the thing I like about the DO report, it's got extensive references. It doesn't use dramatic language. It admits there is a warming impact, but it's just sober. I mean, I suppose my point here is just go back to this idea of consensus. As you say, there's a consensus on this, that carbon dioxide warms the atmosphere. The issue for policymakers like me and how we deal with that is, well, is there still a question about how much warming occurs from a doubling of carbon dioxide? Is that still an open scientific question?
Yeah, so, luckily, this is literally what I've spent the last 10 years researching, so I can answer questions about climate sensitivity in any level of detail you're interested in. It certainly is uncertainty, but the uncertainty is bounded. And this is this is a trope. Because there's uncertainty, the implication is we don't know anything about it. But there's lots of uncertainty in the world and in climate science where the uncertainty is limited. So if you look at the IPCC report, if you look at published assessments, credible published assessments, there is uncertainty in the climate sensitivity between 2.5 and 4 degrees Celsius for doubled carbon dioxide. And that is legitimate uncertainty. But the uncertainty doesn't go to zero. It's not like climate or go to 1 degree or something where it's like, well, the warming is going to be so minor, we don't need to worry about it. And I think the DOE report misrepresents the uncertainty in that number.
Okay, so there is uncertainty about that. And the issue I've got then, are you familiar with William Nordhaus's DICE model?
I'm not an economist, but I am familiar with it.
Yeah. So you might know that, when he runs the numbers, and again, he's no global warming skeptic. He believes there's an issue. He believes there should be action taken. But in his model, it's very clear that trying to limit temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius is massively costly. And indeed, on his net present value, it's a $14 trillion cost. And it would be much more sensible and a positive net present value to simply limit in his optimal level to a carbon content of 560 parts per million. Now, of course, we can argue the toss of the assumptions in that model, but this is the issue I've got here. A lot of what is being categorised as misinformation to this inquiry is, to me, legitimate policy debate about to what extent we act on this issue, to what costs we take. Clearly, this particular economist, he's a Nobel Prize-winning economist, I should say, Professor William Nordhaus, he comes to the conclusion that we shouldn't adopt the Paris Agreement net zero model, that we should have a longer transition to a higher level of carbon content in the atmosphere to maximise human welfare. I mean, is it legitimate in your view, is it misinformation to suggest, as William Nordhaus does, that the Paris Agreement is too big a cost, at least how the Paris Agreement is currently being implemented, is too big a cost for human welfare?
Yeah, so I can't speak to what Nordhaus thinks. I mean, I've seen his papers. I believe his last paper he published a year or two ago said that in his DICE model, the optimal of warming was 2.7 Celsius. If you go back a couple of years, it was 3.5 degrees Celsius. I think if your numbers are changing that much over a few years, I don't have a lot of confidence in any of your numbers. And I would add, if you talk to economists, which I do, they largely agree with that. None of them believe that those models. I think the models are interesting. They're academically fascinating about how you can change parameters, you get these different answers, but nobody believes that we should be betting the future of the planet on the DICE model. I mean, that is not something I think any legitimate economist would tell you. So I think what we need to do...
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am an economist. I've used not the DICE model, but I've used models like this. I totally agree. I wouldn't be making major policy decisions based on economic models alone. They are not accurate enough. They're informative, but just like I wouldn't be making decisions based on simply the climate science alone. As I said yesterday, there's very complex trade-offs here between the need for poorer people to have access to electricity, the need to deal with other environmental issues, one that kills a lot more people than carbon emissions in terms of air pollution, particularly from the burning of biomass and biofuels in developing countries, kills something like 6 million people a year. So, you know, that all of these things have to be considered in any response. My problem is we currently some of the discussion obsesses over one particular issue and therefore is distortive. And to the extent that if anyone does raise other issues like I just had, the 6 million people dying of indoor and outdoor air pollution, not greenhouse gas emissions, this is soot in the atmosphere, etc. That issue that is seen as misinformation, trying to delay action when you're actually trying to save people's lives. I mean, it's a very strange debate, I find. But again, I mean...
Senator Canavan, sorry, that'll have to be your last question. I'll just get Dr. Dessler to respond and then I'll go to Senator Pocock.
I would never call discussions of air pollution misinformation. I think that's extremely important to talk about air pollution. And in fact, fossil fuels are terrible polluters of the air, responsible for millions of deaths every year. I think we absolutely need to work on that. And I also agree with you that policy decisions aren't made just on science or economics. Nevertheless, I think we need to agree on what the science is. We need to agree that the Earth is warming, that humans are to blame for the warming, that it's driving extreme weather, some extreme weather events, not necessarily everyone, but it's driving a lot of them.
I'd love to. I'll made on notice because the chair's not giving me equal time, but I'd love on notice to hear your views on cyclones, on bushfires. I mean, the DOE report clearly shows that there are fewer cyclones impacting most parts of the world. There is less area being burned by wildfires. I mean, that's clear evidence.
Senator Canavan, sorry, I'll come back to you if we do have extra time. I'll get Dr. Dessler and Ms. Sell to respond to it. Then I'm going to go to Senator Pocock.
Do you want me to respond to cyclones?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So we understand. So cyclones. It's hard to give a very short answer, which I'm trying to do. There are several factors about cyclones. There's the number of factors. We don't really know what's going to happen to the number of hurricanes or cyclones, tropical cyclones. Exactly. We don't have a good theory of it. We know that every cyclone that forms. We don't know.
Sorry, if you could just finish your response, Dr. Dessler.
Sure. So we know every cyclone that does form is riding on a higher sea level. So you're going to get more coastal flooding from a bigger storm surge. We understand that a warmer atmosphere holds more water vapor, so we're going to get more rain from the cyclone. And we understand that in a warmer atmosphere, we expect, although the data aren't great on this, they're going to be more intense. So while we don't know the numbers, we know that every one that forms is going to be more destructive.
Okay.
And I think the DOE report whiffed on that.